Yo guys, how's it going? Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to this video. This is my video on the meta in each tier for each nation in War Thunder. So my plan for this video is to go across the tiers. I'm only going to cover tier 3, 4 and 5 because those are the tiers which I have most experience in, and I only want to give accurate content, and I don't feel I have enough experience in tiers 1, 2 or 6 to give such content on. So I'm going to go across each tier for each of the 4 nations which I play, again because I don't want to give any inaccurate content, which will be the USA, Germany, USSR and Britain. So to begin with, in tier 3, the USA rely very heavily on rushing the cap and getting in a plane to release their CAS, Cancerous Allied Air Support, air quotes, support on the enemy. This is one of my least favourite strategies in War Thunder because it really takes tanks off of the ground and puts planes which aren't really necessary in the air. I mean, sure, it wins some games, but I can't really recommend this. It's why CAS got nerfed so long ago. In tier 3 you also get the introduction of the Jumbo, which is the first viable American heavy tank, and boy is it viable. The tank is ridiculous, you can withstand anything really. And also you get the Shermans with actual cannons like the 76mm, which can deal with Tiger 1s which they face on a almost per game basis. As I said, you have the best CAS in your tier with things like the P-47 and the Bearcat, which just absolutely shit on ground vehicles, which I believe you can see in the background at the moment. However, you do lack large fuck-off guns like the Russians and the Germans have. You don't really have any big guns which deal big damage, which can be a bit of a downside when you are fighting against heavily armoured tanks. So the meta for USA tier 3 is using cover or mobility to put shots at the enemy then retreat. There aren't really any brawlers, like things which excel in urban combat in this tier. But an important thing to note is that guns can frontally penetrate the Tiger 1 at decent range. So moving on to Germany, you have the tier 3 Tiger and Panther spam, and oh my god, I love getting that team composition where it's like half Tigers, half Panthers, nothing else. And another fact which gets overlooked often is you get the Wirbelwind and the Ostwind, which are godlike magical bullshit laser beam tanks. They destroy planes. However, your team will often get flanked and therefore die quickly, so I would recommend checking your flanks every now and then because you will be facing the American Hellcat spam and other light tanks from other nations, which if they get on your flanks, they will absolutely wreak havoc. To vary up the team composition, I would suggest taking out the Nashorn or the Waffenträger, because you get the long 88 at 5.3 and 5.7 respectively, and lots of people don't realise how just overpowered this is. It's ridiculous, and it also brings a nice dynamic change to the gameplay. Another important thing to note is that most of the tanks are very slow or medium slow, like the Panther. You'll never be the first tank to get anywhere, so this often means that your flanks are compromised, like I said earlier, and it's quite difficult to react quickly to these threats because you have such poor mobility. So you very rarely get German teams rushing caps for planes in tier 3 because there is very little choice for CAS potential, except you inevitably get at least half a team that spawns like a Focke-Wulf A5 and with no ordnance and just uselessly flies about. Or you get the people that just play tanks and then spawn in their Stukas and wonder why they're losing games because they're just wasting SP. When you're driving out the German heavy tanks, it is essential to know that you can be frontally penetrated by anything at your tier. So for the Russian tank tech tree, this really is your golden age. I mean, tier 3 is. you get the best medium tanks in your entire tier, and you get introduced to the 85mm cannon, which can absolutely just delete enemies. You can pretty much penetrate any armour you come up against, and you have such a wide variety of tanks to choose from that you can be suited to deal with almost any situation. It's also really good how American shells will often bounce off against your armour, because it is so well angled and it's not negligible in amounts. The 5.7 tank is really underused, and when it is used it's misused. The IS-1 should only ever be a sniper, but I see lots of people using it as a brawler, which it shouldn't be, and so they complain that it isn't good and therefore stop playing Russian Tier 3. I'm not sure why, but they do. However, you do lack serious penetration unless you have APCR, which is unfortunately a module you have to research, so at long ranges Tigers can be challenging. It's important to note that you shouldn't rush caps because you have no decent CAS, and you really rely on other nations which you are partnered with to use their CAS to attack the enemy. And it's also important to note that you have absolute shit for SPAA. I mean, the ZSU-37, really, are you kidding me? That thing's awful. I know it's a tier 4, but I'm going to count it as tier 3 because it's 4.3. It's no good at taking up planes, so you are very vulnerable to other allies' CAS, which really does you dirty in the long run. The main meta for Russian Tier 3 is swarming the enemies, and you're able to swarm the enemies because none of your team are just spawning in planes and being useless. They're all spawning in tanks because the planes are bad. But it does rely on other nations to be effective in its CAS terms, but other than that it still has one of the best win rates of all, so it's a very good tier. As I said, it's the golden age. And finally, for tier 3 we have Britain. Absolute shite. You have very mediocre guns at best, which only fire AP or APC ammo, which is, again, at best, ineffective. You also have really questionable mobility, and you cannot reverse, which is something which really makes a tank. The Churchill Mark 7 is a 4.7 heavy, which is extremely good, but it does become less useful when up-tiered. At British Tier 3 there's only one or two fast vehicles which could rush the cap, but then again I wouldn't recommend it because the CAS is, again, underwhelming. However, towards the end of 3 you get access to the APDS shell, which makes everything very much easier, and you can penetrate anything and do lots of damage to anything. However, your tanks do have paper armour, so you'll struggle even against German SPAA, which can be challenging. So overall I'd say this is just a weak tier, and the meta is just normally using your good gun depression to snipe over ridge lines into the enemies, because you can't flank about them and you can't one-shot them, so what else can you do? Boom! We're into tier 4. So here we go. USA tier 4. You still rely on the rush cap, get in plane, Dar Comrade mentality, which was present in tier 3. And to do this you are given 3 light tanks, the M41, T92 and M56, all in tier 4, and all are absolutely fantastic, except maybe the T92. However, you also get access into the Heat FS APDS meta, which really ruins the game in my opinion, but what can I do? So with this, all your light tanks will get Heat FS, and some of the mediums do as well, which completely negates German armour, which is good for USA, but it makes playing Germans really quite challenging. You also get introduced to the M82 shot on one of the light tanks, the M56, and also on the Pershings, which are the really good medium tanks. However, they do often get up-tiered where they are not really viable. When you get into tier 4, you will also begin to see the T92/T34 heavy tanks spam, and oh my god, it's soul destroying. But this is good for America because they are good tanks, if only just a little bit spammed out. There is a good contrast between armour and mobility, which makes sure that you have good positioning over the map, because there's not too many tanks clumped in one area. In most games you will fight alongside the British, which makes your armour viable, because the two factions which have the most penetration, which are the Americans and British, are fighting alongside each other, so your armour becomes viable because most shots will just bounce off you if you're at range and in the heavy tank. Whereas if you're fighting against these tanks, good luck bouncing anything when they're using such advanced ammunition. It is also important to remember that air superiority is often maintained because of so many people spawning in planes. This makes it very easy to spam out CAS, and very hard for the enemy to counter your CAS, which is a benefit for America, I guess, but hey, what do I know? Okay, so now we're back to the Germans, the German Tier 4, and oh boy, what a tier this could be. You get introduced to the Tiger 2, you get the RU-251, you get the Long 88 for almost all your tanks. However, the Long 88 is used as a crutch, almost every tank uses it, and it becomes sort of boring and counterable by the opposition. You unfortunately first encounter the Heat FS spam when you're in Tier 4, which entirely nullifies your armour, which is one of the things the German tanks rely on. However, you do finally get some access to some good CAS in the form of the MK103s and MK108s. These can fire APCR shells, APC shells, I don't know. They can fire shells of up to 95mm of penetration, which can absolutely shred tanks from the top down. Good example is the Dornier 335s, any version really, which has the 30mm. However, during Tier 4 you will continue to get flanked from your sides because you're still not really a fast nation, and other nations will always be on your side and will always shoot you in your flanks, which are very vulnerable because ammunition is stored there. So hey, 1 + 1 is 2. It's just not a good thing for German tanks. You do also get up-tiered to 7.7, where you are absolutely shreked, and you can fight against the Object 120 massive bullshit cannon, like Star Destroyer, like death thing, and there's nothing you can do against that. Panthers are one of the main reasons not many people get to Tier 5, because running through, I think, 4 Panthers is such a pain in the arse that no one really gets to the Leopard. And once you get to the Leopard, it is different, but I'll get to that in a minute. The RU-251 is introduced, like I said. However, it is hidden behind a paywall, which can be frustrating for people who want a light tank, because the Germans don't get light tanks because they're not cool enough, you know. My sort of analysis of this meta is that the TDs, like the Jagdpanther, should flank more because they're the most mobile tanks. However, they don't, because they still aren't perfectly mobile. The German Tier 4 is really just a long boy snipey game with some armour when you're fighting against the Russians, but other than that you become irrelevant. And well, we're already halfway through the video. This is the Russian Tier 4. It is good, you get access to the 122mm cannon, and you also sort of get access to Heat FS on the ASU-85 and PT-76. However, they are redundant because they really are just paper-mache tanks, and the Heat FS lacks any post-pen damage, because it being a 76 or 85mm gun, hence not really much boom behind it. You will often fight against Americans and their Heat FS, and thus this makes your armour useless. That is a real tongue twister to say, but yeah, armour is just irrelevant at this tier because of the magical American guns. And you have a lack of heavy tanks in any 6.7 tanks, which means if you get dragged into a 6.7 game, you will be really, not under-tiered, but you will be at a disadvantage, and you don't really have any big guns or big tanks, so Germans are able to use their armour reliably in long-range engagements, which of course favours them. Therefore, try to stick as close as possible to them to ensure your gun can penetrate. Air quotes, on paper, the T-44 is outclassed by other 6.3 medium tanks, however, it still wrecks shit, so I don't know what to say. And A positive having no 6.7 tanks is you won't get dragged into 7.7 games, which means you'll often be top tier, so hey, bonus. CAS is still underpowered, but now you get the IL-10 and SU-6, which are viable actually, but you do get rolled by the British because they are stabilised, and Russian tanks have trouble penetrating the British without the 122mm. The meta for this is really just still using swarm tactics because not many people will be in planes. So, British tier 4. Damn, son. This shit good. This is possibly the most powerful nation per tier in-game. Tanks suddenly have access to fully stabilised guns with 84mm APDS shells. You have no issue penetrating anything at any range, have amazing shell velocity, and you have one fast tank being the Charioteer, but the rest are still really, really slow, like awfully slow. But this doesn't matter because you can just never stop driving and still have perfect aim. Your medium tanks are very well armoured, such as the FV4202 and the Centurion Mark III and 1. These are amazingly well armoured and can really survive a real beating. You also do get access to the Wyvern, which is tier 4 is really where British CAS shines. So you will often end up clubbing games because of a mixture of your amazing tanks, amazing guns, amazing rounds, good CAS, and often favourable matchmaking. So is this balanced? Sure. However, you do get really bad SPAA, so if you're not with a nation which has good SPAA, you will get rolled on. The Tortoise is an interesting tank in this tier because I never see it used, but it does things, it wrecks shit, okay? So if you're listening to this, I recommend you use the Tortoise. 7.0 or 6.7, it's amazing. Anything above that, meh, it's not. So the meta for British tier 4 is just rolling around, shooting anything that moves, and being invulnerable. So yeah, please do what you want with that knowledge. Damn son, we on tier 5 USA. But no, seriously, this is where the USA begins to get outclassed because it relies on 90mm guns, whereas other nations use 105mm guns. So you can see what's going to happen. I know they get access to the 90mm heat with either 305 or 320mm penetration, like you can see my RU-251 using on screen at the moment. It has uses, but it's not as good. There's very few tanks which perform well at their battle ratings. I feel quite a few top-tier American tanks are over-tiered. Almost every tank has Heat FS, but they do have APCR as stock ammunition, which is just so gross to grind through that most people just completely miss it out and either gold their way to tier 6 or just don't play tier 5 America, which is sad because once it does get the Heat FS, it is quite good. You don't get any APDS until a 105mm cannon, but that's no biggie, not that good anyway. Because you have such a small caliber, your shells do lack any major damage, so one-hit kills are very difficult. And you need to know that there aren't any stabilisers at this tier, or for America at least, so that's a big downside in my opinion. So they need to be played as support. This is more of a support meta, getting in the odd shot here, odd shot there, etc. That's the American meta. So on to the German tier 5s, and boy are they painful. You unlock the Leopard 1 stock, and it has the most painful stock grind in history. The APDS is just ineffective, and you will often get up-tiered to where German tanks become very ineffective because they're facing off against 8.0 tanks, and there are no 8.0 German tanks, so you'll be facing off against Chieftains, fully stabilised, have better guns, better armour, stabilisers. There's very little you can do to turn the tides in your favour except get them. However, you do get access to the tier 5 jets, which are the best ground pounders in game, in my opinion, apart from maybe the AD4, but, well, they're not the best at ground pounding, but they're just the best jets overall, and they get ground pound capabilities like the Arados. Arado 234, B2 and C3 are amazing. You fight the Object 120, which is bullshit. Sorry, cough there, I mean balanced. Nothing is stabilised really for Germany either, so that's a big one to keep in mind. And it is also important to know that tanks are completely different to before, so players have to learn new skills before they can become good in these tanks unless they've played other nations. So now we're on to Tier 5 Russia, and oh boy, this is a joy to play out. The 100mm cannon's very common. It has very good characteristics for its APC-BC shell, but not so much for its HEAT-FS or APDS. Therefore, it is reliant on its APC-BC or APHE. You also get access to the Object 906, which is an absolute game changer. It's a very, very, very powerful light tank, but in my opinion, it is underused. There are lots of 7.7 tanks for Russia, so this will often make you top tier if you're playing 7.7. If you're not, you'll often get dragged into 7.7 games. There is almost no CAS potential, or CAS potential, apart from the tier 4 things like the SU6 or IL-10, and I'm not including the MiGs because they're effectively tier 6, and I don't play tier 6. I think it's a bad meta, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. It also does quite well in 8.0 because of competent SPAA being the Shilka and the T62. You get the Object 120. Yeah, there's enough said. That thing needs no introduction. The meta for this still really is using rush tactics because they do face lightly armoured vehicles, which they can easily just delete with their APHE filler and just roll. And finally, we're here at British Tier 5. This is one of the best top tiers in game. You get the Chieftain at 8.0, which is very often down tiered, where it absolutely clubs the living shit out of everything else. Yeah, no resentment there, but it can face 9.0, so I guess that makes me feel slightly better in my heart. The 7.0 medium tanks are absolutely ridiculous. Fully stabilised 105mm at 7.0, just with actually good armour, so that I don't know what to say about that. You get very good attackers like the Attacker FB1, which I know lots of people hate, but if you use it correctly it can be quite effective. These have a perfect synergy with other nations as well, so you can combine your forces very effectively, which is good, I suppose. They're still awfully slow tanks, which I suppose could be quite annoying to play with, and they are still the slowest nation in-game, which means they do often still get flanked and killed very easily. Therefore, I would say that the British meta for Tier 5 is just very snipey and hide behind cover, like you can see I'm doing in my Leopard at the moment. Oh my god, I felt awful playing this thing out. I normally don't like sniping, but there's just this perfect spot on this map. So that is my analysis of the metas in War Thunder complete. I'd like to thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Share this video out if you think it was worthwhile, and leave a comment in the comment section for what you'd like to see below, or any other general questions. I will answer them all, I will reply, and I'll try to improve as the best of my abilities. So, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and hope you enjoy the remaining minute or so of this gameplay in the background. Nothing much really happened, so yeah, thank you very much for watching.
Most of the strategic zones are captured.